If you asked most people to rank major electricity sources from most to least dangerous, nuclear would land near the top of nearly every list. The measured data ranks it alongside wind and solar among the very safest sources of electricity ever deployed at scale. This isn't a matter of interpretation or opinion. It is one of the more thoroughly documented and most consistently misunderstood data sets in all of energy research. Researchers at our World in Data drawing on peer-reviewed work including Markandya and Wilkinson's 2007 study on fossil fuel health impacts and Sovacool's 2016 analysis of renewable and nuclear accident data use a standardized metric, deaths per terawatt hour of electricity produced. This captured both direct accidents, mining collapses, plant failures, and indirect deaths from chronic air pollution exposure, allowing genuinely different technologies to become compared on equal footing rather than through anecdote or headline silence. Here is the ranking in deaths per terawatt hour of electricity produced. Coal approximately 25, oil approximately 18, biomass approximately 5, natural gas approximately 3, hydropower approximately 0.02, wind approximately 0.04, nuclear approximately 0.07, solar approximately 0.02. To put the extremes in perspective, coal is roughly 350 times deadlier per unit of electricity produced than nuclear power, a technology most people rank as comparatively dangerous. The reason this gap doesn't match public intuition comes down on to how each death is experienced, not how many actually occur. Coal's toll is overwhelmingly chronic respiratory and cardiovascular disease from sustained air pollution exposure, accumulating quietly over years and distributed across an entire population, never making a single dramatic headline. Nuclear's much smaller toll, by contrast, is concentrated in a small number of acute, highly visible, extensively covered events. Our psychology, understandably, weighs a vivid, sudden, well-documented catastrophe far more heavily than diffuse statistical toll spread across millions of quite individually unremarkable deaths, even when the diffuse toll is, in aggregate, dramatically larger. Nuclear energy public safety perception rests almost entirely on two events: Chernobyl in 1986 and Fukushima in 2011. Both were genuinely serious accidents, and neither should be minimized, but it's worth being precise about scale, even including every documented death attributed to both accidents combined. Nuclear's death rate per unit of electricity produced remains dramatically lower than every fossil fuel source, and comparable to wind and solar, the public perception gap isn't irrational exactly. It reflects a real, well-documented feature of human risk psychology. It is, however, measurably inconsistent with the actual data. It is worth being specific here, because vague references of these accidents tend to get filled in with worst-case assumptions. The World Health Organization and the International Atomic Energy Agency's point systems attribute approximately 50 direct deaths to the Chernobyl accident and its immediate aftermath, primarily among emergency responders, with a further estimated range of several thousand additional deaths projected over subsequent decades from radiation-linked cancer among the most exposed population. A serious toll but one that remains, even at the higher end of credible estimates, a small fraction of the annual toll from coal-related air pollution in any single major coal-dependent country. Fukushima's death toll from radiation exposure itself is far smaller still. The World Health Organization's assessment found no discernible increase in cancer rates attributable to radiation among the general population, with the accident incidence largest human toll instead coming from the evacuation process itself. Particularly among elderly residents, neither accident is fully specified in a single sentence without erasing real human loss, but neither approaches the encompassing sense of catastrophe that shapes most people's mental model of nuclear risk. This mortality data isn't purely a historical curiosity. It directly informs the wave of corporate nuclear investment we've examined elsewhere in this series. When Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and Meta each committed to gigawatts of nuclear capacity to power AI infrastructure, they were making that decision against exactly this evidence base, a firm, dispatchable zero-carbon power source with a measured safety record on par with wind and solar, and dramatically better than any fossil fuel alternative. Public perception has historically been the primary obstacle to nuclear expansion in many countries, more so than the underlying economics or engineering, which makes the gap between perceived and measured risk not just a psychology curiosity, but a genuine constraint on how quickly the energy system can decarbonize while meeting AI-driven demand growth. Understanding why this gap exists doesn't automatically close it, and it's worth being honest about that. Vivid, available, emotionally salient risks are processed differently by human cognition than diffuse statistical ones. This isn't a flaw specific to public attitudes toward nuclear power. It is a well-documented general feature of how risk perception works across nearly every domain, from air travel to rare crime. The practical implication for policy and public communication isn't to dismiss public concern as simply irrational, but to recognize that closing this gap requires deliberately surfacing the diffuse, currently invisible toll of the alternatives, not just reciting nuclear safety statistics in isolation. Nearly every major decision about how we generate electricity for the next century, including how we power the AI systems already reshaping the global economy, depends on getting this comparison right. The data has been available and consistent for well over a decade. What remains unresolved isn't the science, it is the considerably harder problem of aligning collective intuition with what the evidence has already quite clearly settled. Thank you so much for your presence. I'm really looking forward to meaningful discussions. If you have any questions, comments, feedbacks, feel free to leave them in a comment. Make sure I'll respond to each and every one of them proactively, and looking forward to see you in the next lecture.